So I thought I was making a bit of headway on the old Beermail, and then more turned up. So quick shout out to Luke Stevens for the 2 beers that he sent to me. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for those. And I'm going to be drinking one of them today because I've got a few IPAs. One of his, which is a NEIPA, which I want to get drunk fairly fresh. So let's get stuck into them. So first up, we've got Luke's Sabru 1 NEIPA, clocking in at 7.5%. Not fucking about there. And we've got verdant yeast in there. So that's obviously Sabro and Brew 1 hops. Whoa, yeah. He's testing me out there with the firmness of the cap application. Let's get this one into a glass. It's looking pretty good so far. Yeah, and there's some nice aroma coming off of that too. So on the appearance, we've got a kind of pale yellow, not quite orangey, orange juice colour, more kind of that sort of pineapple juice, just slightly lighter yellow, little bit of foam on the top, not a massive amount of head. There's bubbles coming up the side, so it's not hugely carbonated, but there's definitely some fizz in there. And yeah, looks like a NEIPA. Aroma wise, interestingly, there's a really kind of sort of creamy tropical fruit aroma coming off of this. So a lot of people talk about Sabro having some coconut element to it. I've not necessarily got that on a lot of Sabro beers that I've tried myself, but this one, there's I don't know if I'd say coconut, but there's definitely sort of like a creamy kind of pineapple type thing going on. I know the Brew 1 pushes out a lot of pineapple flavour. The NEIPA from Andrew Lynch that I had Brew 1 in it, and that was very, very pineapple-y. Not necessarily the usual sort of tropical aromas that you might get with a NEIPA, but very nice nonetheless. So yeah, it's kind of like there's a little bit of a hint of that kind of like Malibu aroma to it. You know, what is Malibu flavour? I mean, that's like coconut and pineapple, isn't it? I think maybe. Might be why that's putting that in my mind. Anyway, enough sniffing. Let's have a little drink. So the mouthfeel is quite smooth. Pineapple again is definitely there. Now that I've mentioned Malibu, I'm kind of like thinking this tastes a little bit like there's a hint of that in there as well. There's a little bit of sharpness there from the hops, I guess. You do get a little bit of the booze there too, so there's a little bit of a tang from the alcohol. I'd say I do get coconut on the flavour of this as well. Much more so than I have with a lot of other Sabro beers, so that's really interesting. Because some people rave about it having coconut, other people say they don't really get it. I've not necessarily sort of picked up on that in other Sabro beers that I've tried, but it's definitely there on this. I think maybe could be a bit thicker. I don't know whether this is attenuated down a little bit more than you're expecting, Luke, perhaps. Maybe that's why the ABV is quite high. I mean, 7.5 isn't ridiculous for a NEIPA, but it's certainly sort of up towards the top end because you're getting towards double IPA territory there. So I don't know whether that's part of that, but I mean, I'm sure there are sort of oats and or wheat in this as well. I think there's a little bit of that sort of tangy, almost like yogurty flavour that you get from the verdant yeast there as well, perhaps. But otherwise, you know, it's got the fruit flavour, it's got the aroma. It's a slightly different flavour profile to what you get in a lot of NEIPAs. So this is, yeah, kind of this sort of sharp pineapple-y, but then kind of creamy coconut at the same time. But yeah, pretty good. I know that Luke's not been homebrewing for a huge amount of time, and he sent me a few beers before this one already, and yeah, I mean, I'd be well chuffed if I was knocking beers out like this already. And there's definitely been some notable progression in them so far as well, mate. So thank you very much for sending them to me so I can try them out. Yeah, very nice. Thank you, Luke. Right, let's crack another one. So this is going to be the Elvis Juice clone beer by Andrew Lynch, High Road Brewery. I've raved about his videos on the previous one, so I won't kiss his ass anymore on this, but go and check his channel out. I'll put a link up for the video that I'm pretty sure he's got a video for this beer specifically, so you can go and have a look at that if you want. But like I said before, go and sub his channel because it's really good. So this is, I believe, basically as per the recipe out of the Brewdog DIY book. So if you don't know, all of their recipes are available online, or versions of them anyway. How close they are to the real thing is questionable in some cases, but we'll move on from that. So this is pretty true to the recipe, I think, aside from being fermented with Voss yeast. So it's got quake yeast in it, but 6.5%. Andrew used grapefruit extract in this as well, the stuff that's available on the malt miller, rather than, as I'm going back to the recipes out of the book, the recipe for this one recommends using grapefruit and orange peel. Now, I've used grapefruit and orange peel. I've done my own version of this beer myself before, and it certainly imparts grapefruit flavour, but does it create the sort of flavour that you get in commercial grapefruit beers? No, not really, because to be honest, most of those breweries are going to be using extracts, as I'm sure Brewdog do, in the real thing, rather than actual grapefruit peel or other citrus peels. So it gives you a different flavour, really. Not so much the juice, much more of that kind of bitter kind of citrus rind flavour, for me anyway. Some people have done clones doing it that way, which have come out really pretty close, but I think you're much more likely to get a really convincing result if you're using extract, for the reasons that I've just said. So in the glass, nice dark honey amber color to it. That's a really nice color on that. Sort of middle or top end of the color range, I guess, for an IPA, I would say, maybe. Although obviously, you get IPAs in all shades and colors these days, so it's not really that big a deal. Nice streaming carbonation, not a massive amount of head on it, but I was quite gentle with the pour. But that little cap on the top is sticking around. Nice white frothy bubbles, and I could smell the aroma as soon as I opened the bottle. You do get a nice grapefruit aroma, funnily enough. I can't remember what the other hops are that are in this recipe. I probably should have done my research or rewatched Andrew's video before I did the tasting, but Simcoe, Amarillo, possibly some Citra, maybe. I'm not sure. There's a few hops in it, I think, and there is quite a high quantity in the recipe as well. But yeah, let's go for a taste. It is mainly just the grapefruit extract that I'm getting on the aroma, and a sort of general hoppiness, bit of sweet malt. It's been quite a while since I've had the actual Elvis Juice, but I'm pretty sure that's not far off. I would say I think you could probably go harder on the grapefruit extract. So what I do remember of Elvis Juice is that it's, smacks you right in the face with the grapefruit flavouring. For some people that might be a bit much, in which case this beer might be a little bit more palatable. But just in terms of judging it purely as a clone recipe, yeah, I think maybe the dosing could be a little bit higher just on the grapefruit, but it's still, obviously the predominant flavour there, and it's pretty good. And it's certainly marrying up with the kind of grapefruit notes from the hops in here as well. Nice dry finish, good kind of bitter, pithy citrus note on the back end, but not so bitter that it's kind of unpleasant at all. So we're definitely in kind of like West Coast kind of IPA territory there as far as the flavour profile goes. It's 6.5%, so it's a fairly sort of satisfying mouthfeel, but still quite dry. So it's quite easy to drink despite that kind of high ABV, but there's a good kind of malty backbone to it as well, holding it up a bit. So there's a bit, you can get a bit of the caramel malt on there, which kind of combines with the citrus flavouring and the hops to give you a little bit of that kind of candy peel sort of flavour a little bit. Carbonation is perfect for an IPA. Just sort of lifting up the aromas and the flavours. Again, coming back to the dosing of the grapefruit, I think the grapefruit aroma on the real Elvis Juice is a little bit more prominent on the nose. So I would say flavour and aroma wise, I'd probably, I don't know, maybe start with sort of 50% more of the extracts. I don't know whether Andy put in like a full bottle of it or whatever, or you need more than one bottle perhaps. But on its own, without thinking about how, you know, how convincing it is as a clone, and I'm not judging it side by side with Elvis Juice anyway, so my thoughts are pretty irrelevant, to be honest, on that. On its own as a standalone IPA, grapefruit IPA, top job really. I can't fault it too much. That is very nice. So another very good quality beer from High Road Brewery. Thank you so much. Cheers. Right, next one up, we've got a unidentifiable bottle of something from Mr. Chris Millington. He was probably too busy telling somebody how good Yorkshire was to get the label sorted for these, so we've got to kind of play beer roulette. I do know actually that this one is an IPL, so it's not going slightly off the track of the IPAs that I've looked at so far, but it's an India Pale Lager, which if you've been listening to the Hop Edition podcast, just getting a chance to squeeze a little plug in there, you'll know that's a style that Chris is really into. I have had a bottle of his IPL before, not this specific recipe, but one that he's done in the past, and it was really good. I know this one isn't as fresh as it could be, so it's been a few months on the keg, but hopefully it's decent. I can't really tell you much else about it because, like I said, no label. So I think he probably used Quake because he's been using Quake in it. So for the pedants, it's probably a pseudo IPL because it's not a lager yeast. More than likely Vienna malt in there, or a high proportion of Vienna malt and some lager malt. Hops, bound to be some Citra. Other than that, probably not Simcoe or Rawaka. If I was going to take a guess, just based on the aroma, I don't know. I'm still going with Citra. Maybe Amarillo. I don't fucking know. There's no way you can tell just by sniffing it, really, is there? Centennial, maybe. I'm going to say Centennial. Right, so appearance-wise, it was pretty carbonated coming out the bottle, so it's formed a nice frothy cap on the top there. The carbonation is not streaming up the outside, and appearance-wise, it's pretty clear. Not 100% crystal, but near enough. And we've got a nice straw leaning towards light amber kind of colour. Looks lagery. Maybe not quite the level of fizz, but definitely appearance wise it's there. The aroma, there's quite a sweet fruity aroma on there, probably a little bit of sweet malt from the Vienna as well. I'm not sure exactly which Quake yeast was used in this, but probably Voss, might have been Uber, which is the lager one. It's quite subtle, the aroma, so there's not massive amount kicking off of this. I'd say a little bit of citrus, maybe orange, a little bit tangerine. Let's give it a taste and see what we get on the flavour. There's quite a bit of malt there. I'm not getting a huge amount of hops on this. The last IPL I had was a bit better than this one, I've got to say. No offence, Chris, but I think this, the previous one, the hops were definitely coming through better on that. I don't know if maybe there's a hint of oxidation on this or something, but there's a slightly odd flavour to the malt. The hops that I am getting through there is, again, kind of like an orangey, quite sweet, almost a marmalade-y kind of orange taste. It's still very drinkable because it's quite light in body, quite dry, nice level of carbonation. Would I drink this and think that it's a lager? No, to be honest, I don't. I'm not 100% convinced by this idea of using quake yeast to do lagers. I know, you know, I've already said like that would make it a pseudo lager anyway, but I just like I don't think that it's that difficult to tell a beer brewed with that sort of yeast apart from a beer that's made with an actual lager yeast. And there's just a different flavor profile. So I don't know, you know, whether it's like the esters that come off of yeasts like this one. I mean, there's some elements there of that kind of lager flavor. So it is quite dry, good carbonation. It is clean. It's pretty clean. I mean, I don't know how much of this flavor is coming off the yeast, but it's a pretty clean flavor profile. But I just feel like there's not that kind of crisp kind of. Yeah, I find it hard to describe without just saying lager flavor, but there's a distinct sort of thing that I get when you're drinking something that's done with a true lager yeast, which is maybe just not quite there when you're doing the sort of pseudo versions. I mean, you can see how quick it's disappearing. It's perfectly drinkable, but the hops aren't really kind of kicking out on this one. I don't know whether that's just because it's getting on a little bit. I know Chris did say it's not the freshest, so it's probably not in its peak condition anyway. There's just a very slightly odd flavour on the malt here, which possibly might be just a touch of oxidation, because it's just leaning towards a slightly sweet, jammy thing. Not massively at all. I mean, you can see like colour-wise it's still fine, but there's maybe just a hint of the start of that. So yeah, the last one was a lot better. And whatever you did on the previous IPL that you sent to me, maybe do more of that. I don't know. It's probably a very similar recipe. It might just be the age of it. But yeah, we'll discuss it on the next podcast maybe. I don't know. Like I said, not terrible, but I know that you've done beers better than this one, in this style anyway. So yeah, thanks very much for sending it. The amber bitter that I had last night was outstanding. We were chatting on Zoom. Maybe would have been better to do that one for video review, to be honest, but that was really good. And that was actually a beer that Chris was going to throw down the drain. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Sometimes the ones that you think are drain cleaner eventually come good. Sometimes the other ones, which start off great, don't age so well. But anywho, so thank you very much. Let's move on. Right, one more beer in this little compilation. So we've got a big hitter to finish with. It's Pulp Fiction Double IPA from Mr. Jamie Nelson, who kindly dropped this off to my house. He's not far away, down in Stevenage, I think, maybe. Is that right? I think that's right, or somewhere near there anyway. So he was up in Bedford for work and had offered some beer to me on a group chat that we were on previously, and this is what he brought me. It's actually the same beer that went into the Secret Santa from Jamie, and he had to turn this around pretty quickly because he hadn't actually brewed anything for quite a while. So this was done with quake yeast. I think it was Voss. I can't remember what hops went into it. I'm pretty sure that he told me, but no, I've pretty much forgotten everything else about it, apart from the fact that it's a double IPA and it's 7.8%. I have already drunk the other one that he gave to me, but I did that in the middle of the podcast, Christmas podcast for the Hop Edition, where I got absolutely plastered, and I really can't remember an awful lot about it, apart from that it was part of the collection of beers that knocked me on my arse. So let's try the second one out and see what we've got. It's pouring pretty thick and orangey looking, almost NEIPA-like. Well, very NEIPA-like, in fact. Super hazy. Yeah. Orange juice kind of colour. Nice little frothy white cap on the top. Decent amount of carbonation. And yeah, pretty much opaque all the way through it. So, looks nice. On the nose, we've got some orange is the main thing that I pick up straight away. Not just because it looks like orange juice, but there's some kind of orangey tangerine stuff going on there. Quite a gentle fruity aroma, actually. Maybe not quite as potent as you might expect for a double IPA. But yeah, just kind of sweet orangey, hoppy aroma there. Nice sweet malt that you'd expect with a fairly high ABV beer. Let's see how it tastes. There is some orange there on the flavour as well. It doesn't really taste like a 7.8% beer. It's quite full-bodied. It's reasonably sweet. There's a little bit of alcohol warmth there, but it's not obviously a really strong beer, which it definitely is if it's 7.8%. Yeah, it's quite a kind of a slightly pithy orangey bitterness there, but the bitterness is quite restrained as well for a double IPA, to be honest. I'd say that the hops are not quite punching through as much as you would expect for this kind of style of beer. Yeah, not a huge aroma from them. The flavour's not really punchy either, but I don't know whether the yeast, the Voss, is bringing some of that orange flavour as well, because that is definitely sort of known for the kind of orangey flavours as well, so that could be contributing to it there. I'm not sure whether sometimes when you're really pushing to try and get that rapid fermentation and using the higher temperatures and stuff like that with IPAs like this, that maybe that's kind of blasting away some of the hop aroma perhaps and flavour in some way. I know that this was a particularly vigorous fermentation, because I did see some pictures of it trying to escape from the fermenter that Jamie sent to us. So, you know, maybe, obviously in this case, it had to be a quick turnaround because the beer needs to be ready to be sent out for Christmas. So obviously it's understandable to be pushing that as hard as you could in terms of the fermentation time. But I think for this beer, it would probably benefit being done again, but maybe slowing that fermentation down, or just using a yeast which is a bit more typical for this style of beer. So I would maybe try something like the London Ale Free, or the Verdant yeast, or the Vermont yeast, Conan yeast. And I think maybe you'd keep a little bit more from the hops in that case. It's quite pleasant to drink for sure. So like I said, it's almost drinks more like a sort of strong pale ale, really, because it's not got the big kick of bitterness and the really punchy hops there. And the alcohol's kind of hidden quite well too. So yeah, pretty drinkable. Nice beer. I would maybe not do it with a volcanic quake yeast next time, and just slow the fermentation down a bit. Give yourself a little bit more time to get the hop flavour in there and not sort of ferment it out, maybe, which I kind of feel like maybe that's happened a little bit with this beer. But I think as far as, you know, a base to work from, it's a good starting point for sure. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Jamie. Appreciate that. And yeah, look forward to seeing what else you do with the brew kit, because that's pretty good effort for the first beer back after a bit of a hiatus from the brewing. So well done, mate. Cheers.
I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, you know? That, or his dudeness, or duder, or, you know, El Duderino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing.